Hello, friends. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. I wanted to come to you again, once again, from a very, very bad angle, to talk to you. And this little curtain is in my way. I guess I could have just moved it. What is wrong with me? Anyway, I wanted to come to you to talk to you today about writing. The reason I thought about this video is because I keep seeing these posts on Tumblr that are about writer's block and just the writer's lifestyle, how all during the day they have nothing to say, and then at midnight, that's when the stroke of genius comes, or just like rereading a statement to make sure that it makes any kind of sense, or checking the definition of a word 15 times to make sure it means what you think it means before you put it in there. And that's kind of funny because a lot of those things that I dealt with myself. And then sometimes I just didn't even check something, and because I was just so overwhelmed, and I look back and I'm like, oh, wow, I spelled that kind of wrong. Or like I put a guy's name in the book and I spelled his name wrong. I spelled it with an I instead of an A, stuff like that. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about Dark World Light Work, and how I came to write it. Now, most of the writers that I believe that I'm looking at on Tumblr are fiction writers. And so that is slightly different than writing a story that is from your real life experience. I used to write fiction when I was younger. I used to write short stories all the time, and I wrote many, many screenplays throughout college. And it was decidedly more difficult than writing my life story, obviously, because all I had to do with my life story was go in order. And the biggest problem, clearly, with my 842-page memoir, Dark World Light Work, was actually cutting things out, leaving out information. Like I mentioned before, I left out the entire high school and college, and the book is still 842 pages. And I wanted to share with you, I've mentioned this before, but this is really funny, not a mistake, but just my kind of innocence or ignorance is partially the reason why the book is so long. I got it into my head. I don't even know where I came up with this idea, but I got it into my head that a person should be writing 20 pages a day. Now, I found out after I wrote 12 composition notebooks that equaled 842 typed out pages that the average writer writes about a single page a day. And that sounds more correct, because when I used to write fiction, I wrote about a page a day. When I wrote screenplays, I used to write about a page a day. But as I wrote my memoir, was just pouring out from my heart, and I ended up with sometimes more than 20 pages. And from April 2024 to July 2024 is when I wrote the book. It took about 4 months, and it filled up 12 composition notebooks, and I wrote it all by hand. Then I had to type it onto the computer, which took another 4 months. It took about as long, maybe because I'm not really that great at typing, to transpose it onto the computer. But I really, really wanted it to write it by hand, partially because I'm not that great of a typer, and I really just wanted it to come out the way that I felt it. And I really never had any days where I had writer's block. I never had a single day where I didn't have anything to write. There were certain days where I was too tired to write, but I never had a day where there was nothing to write. And I also looked at it as a job. I dedicated 8 hours each day to focusing just on that. Most of the time, I did have something maybe in the background, like as far as music or maybe a video playing, but I really did focus on just writing. And I would go downstairs in my mom's office and sit at the desk, and her dogs and Clementine would be around me, and they would be laying around while I was writing. And I really dedicated myself to it on a daily basis. I made it my job, and I dedicated at least 8 hours to it. And I filled up the entire 8 hours. Obviously, writing 20 pages a day, you can do that. And I think partially that's the reason why I finished the book so quickly. Number one, because I was just kind of pouring out my heart. And number two, I made it a job. I made it a business. And if you've been following along here, you know that when I do that, I'm very committed. I'm committed to the gym like that. I'm committed to walking Clementine like that. I'm committed to making my videos like that. I was committed to the jobs that I had, the actual physical jobs that I have had. I was committed to my grandmother that way. I've committed to every one of my relationships that way. That's just the type of person. I'm a dedicated person, and once I get locked in, it is go time. So while I rarely had a day where I didn't have I never had a day where I didn't have anything to write. I did have some days where I didn't feel like doing it at all. And partially because I think when you turn anything into a job, you do need a break from it. So every once in a while, I would just get into a thing where I was like, I don't want to open up the books today. I just won't do it. And I would take a day off. But even at that, I didn't take that many. And in 4 months, I finished it. And then in about 4 more months, I finished putting it on to the digital. And then a bunch of crazy stuff happened in my life. My mom kicked me out of the house that I was staying at with her, and I ended up staying in the Airbnbs. I finished everything in the Airbnbs and was able to work with a formatter who I found on Fiverr, and she formatted it for me, and that took another 3 months. It took as long as it took me to write the book and for me to transpose it onto the computer as it did for this woman to format it. And we went back and forth, and it was a little bit stressful because she was in Pakistan and the time difference was different, but she was very, very, what is the word? Efficient. And like, no matter what, it was so cool and strange that within 2 hours, she was always answering me. So I don't know when this woman slept or anything like that, but I'm very grateful to her for helping me get it through to the end, because once it got to the formatting, I was just like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do here. I was reading instructions on it, and I was just like, this is not going to happen. So I just finally ran into the website called Fiverr, if you've ever heard of it. It's actually a really cool website for stuff like that, because you can outsource a lot of different things that have to do with the book. And there's plenty of people who will format it specifically for the publishing company that you're using. And I happen to use the publishing company Ingram Spark. And I picked that one because it seemed like the most user-friendly and the one that was not corporate. It was like the least corporate one, and it actually was pretty easy to navigate. The woman did say she had a little bit of trouble. There is like something about their formatting process that is a little more difficult than KDP, which is Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing. However, I didn't want to use Amazon. I actually didn't even want to sell my book on Amazon, but at some point after I put it out, I was like, well, how is anybody even going to see it? Like, I want somebody to just randomly be able to see it. And so I decided to put it on Amazon. But it was a very fun process to me. And I think that's writing should be fun. And I see a lot of these posts where people are super stressed, and they're only stressed at the times when the writing doesn't flow. But you have to understand that that is just the nature of anything. And writing is like the sea. It is very forceful. You have very little control over it, and it comes in waves. And what you have to do is just ride the wave of creativity. And then when the tide is low, you just celebrate that. You dance in the sand. And just enjoy every step of the process. Understand that you have an extraordinary gift, and that is a blessing. Don't look at it as a burden. Don't look at the times when you feel like you're in scarcity as a disaster. It is simply a part of the process, and the process is a remarkable one because you are creating something beautiful for others by transmuting something. Sometimes it's something beautiful and sometimes it's something not, in yourself into something artistic for everybody else. And I love that. I love that about it. I love the madness of writers. I love an artist, and I love just the crazed energy of an artist who is so passionate about their craft that it almost drives them batty. There is something very sexy, very appealing, very beautiful about that energy. That is why people are drawn to us, people who carry that energy, and that is why we are so powerful. And with great power comes great responsibility, not just to the art, but to ourselves as the conduit to the art and the artist. And so I thought I would just share that little story and share that with the other writers out there so that they can maybe pick up some tips on life and some tips on writing. Remember to treat yourself with a great deal of grace and respect, because a lot of times, especially if you're a fledgling writer, you don't get a lot of respect for your work. A lot of people do, luckily, now that they can put their stuff online, and especially people who write stuff like fan fiction and stuff, that has such a huge audience that you really do get a lot of positive feedback. But there are people like me out there who write kind of niche, I think that's the word, niche things that aren't as widely appreciated. So it's very important for people like us to appreciate ourselves and each other. The camera cut off, but I want to come back. I know the angle has changed. So basically, in conclusion, I just wanted to give a little bit of backstory on my book, Dark World Light Work. Like I mentioned before, it is a memoir. It is based on my life story. It starts in the Garden of Eden, and it starts with me in preschool, and it goes all the way to the present day. It goes all the way to about a year ago, when I was still staying at my parents' or at my mom's house. And then the vlogs, which you are watching right now, pick up where the book leaves off. And so everything that's been happening since is a continuation of what happened in the book. And I met this guy at the gym, and he was super cool. And he sent me this AI, breakdown of my book. Like, he put information about the book into AI, and it spit out this thing. And the AI was talking about how the book was a little bit, obviously, they were like, I've never seen an 842-page memoir. Even AI said that. They were like, that is very, very unconventional. And they were like, the author might want to consider breaking the book into 3 parts. As for a writer that nobody knows, they're not going to want to pick up an 842-page book and read it. And I do understand that, and that was my biggest fear. But I just want it to be one of those things where you're either accepting it as it is or you're not. Because not only is the book overwhelming in size, in girth, but it's also kind of overwhelming in content. And I don't mean overwhelming as in it would be too much for you to understand or too much for you to comprehend or handle. It's just a ton of information. But I'm coming down here almost like an oracle to drop as many codes as I possibly can. And I'm not going to hold back. And I certainly didn't. And the book is not for the weak. And it's not for somebody who wants to half-ass something. And because of that, I know it's not going to be a daunting task. Like I mentioned before, the first person to read it, and so far the only person I've ever gotten feedback on about it, read it in a month. And this is a man who was not a reader. I think he said he doesn't even know the last time he read a book. And he was able to get through it in a month. And so I'm very impressed by him. And I'm very impressed by myself, because that is exactly what I wanted. And I want to also mention, I was watching a girl on YouTube, a woman and her friend, and they were doing a little, it wasn't a podcast, but it was kind of similar to that. And while I was writing, they were talking about books and things that they love. And I kept hearing, and they were like joking with each other. And they were like, just keep the chapter short. Both of the girls were like, oh, I don't care if the book is 1,000 pages as long as the chapters aren't more than 10 pages each. And I stuck to that. I was like, I'm going to listen to these girls. Because it's a girl I watch on YouTube. She's super funny, because these girls know what they're talking about. They're avid readers. And I have some chapters that are 1 page long. And the longest chapters are the ones where I talk about the dark world in depth, and they're about 40 pages. But most of the chapters are on average less than 10 pages long. So when I tell you, you'll be able to get through the book very quickly. It's an easy read. You can get through the first 20 chapters in a day, because they're each only 3 or 4 pages long. So don't worry about that part. If you've already been desensitized to the madness by this channel, the content's not going to bother you that much. And then it's about me, and we're besties, right? Anyway, it's really, really actually very good. The more I think about it and the more things occur after the fact, the book keeps getting better and better, because everything I wrote just keeps getting co-signed. Like, there's more evidence and everything. And when I wrote it, I was writing it in kind of a bubble, and that bubble has since burst thanks to this very channel. And so I'm grateful to have that, and I'm grateful to have everything, the Spotify, the soundtracks, and all of it. And I'm grateful to have this gift as a writer and as an artist, so I could transmute all of this tremendous negative energy, this tremendous negative energy into something beautiful. Now, there we go. All right.